see if I can start my recording and make sure that's working. So I've started that. There you go. I can mute you, make presenter. Yes. You are now presenter. You should be able to share your screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right now, my intention is to figure out.
There, I can
I
see
think
your.
this is so what I always want to have happen, which I can and cannot on occasion make manifest, is that I know how to be both be presenting so that the audience sees the presentation only, but have it be a smaller window. And sometimes I can do it, but sometimes I can't, and I don't quite understand why there is a difference. You know what I mean? It's
I do.
fine.
Um,
I'm not like
can you,
too tore up about it, but it does annoy me that I can't just do
so
it.
I just expanded your window. Did you see that? Or is it only on my screen? Okay, so
Only
that's
on
my
yours.
control that I can expand, but it too much. Okay, let me think a minute here. If I mouse over your allow chat.
Oh, this is also interesting. It cuts off my slides a little. This is good to know now. Before later, let me see if it's actually like a problem on any of the slides. Your view is slightly different than mine. It cuts off like this very bottom bit.
I see that. Um,
It's okay, I can fix it in my slides, but it is surprising to me.
well, that's why I wonder if we can change the display in some manner.
Mm-hmm.
So you're presenting in Google.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's my problem. In
Um,
my memory, like I thought in Google I could still do.
well, what I'm wondering is if it's strictly a margin thing. So do the slides have?
Let's try it again. Yeah, I hear what you're like. Do the slides have
Yeah.
a ready margin that? There we go. This seems to work better. I wonder if I could have, and I think this is also something that you were sort of exploring as you were talking, was like if I could reshape my. Oop. Yay! Okay, cool.
Okay. I don't know how to eliminate the band of attendees. Um, so wait, maybe I do. So if you go to the three little dots on your screen in your picture in
Mm-hmm,
the upper
mm-hmm,
right, do you
mm-hmm.
see share attendee list and chat? If you uncheck, you don't. Okay, so that's got to be just that I see. So if I,
Yeah, maybe as like the host or something.
yeah, I just unchecked it and that didn't do a thing. Okay, so that didn't work. Um, so I made you presenter. I wonder what happens if I make you the organizer. Hold on to your hat. All organizers have equal rights and can override the action taken by other organizers. Ha ha ha.
Oh,
Cannot be removed once it's granted. Do I want to make you? Whoa! Sure, I'm
That's so
an
intense.
you are now an
I'm
organizer,
now an organizer. All
but
right,
I
let's.
don't see that allows you.
Oh, I do have a view thing where it says that I can view everyone who's talking active cameras or hide everyone.
Oh, yes, I forgot about that menu.
Copy email address to clipboard. Ooh.
So I know you can change like where the camera view is, left, right, top, and bottom.
Oh. God. Sometimes,
And I
Lori,
think as more people log in, the band of video
people's.
shrinks. Um,
Well, I'm going to see what it is if I just say I don't want to see anything.
okay.
What happens when I do that? Collapse. Ooh. All right. So now I don't get to see other windows on my screen, but I can. Oh, Eli arrived. Hi, Eli. Welcome. Um, but I can see like my whole screen, so that's nice.
Okay, but it doesn't do anything for me as a co-organizer, changes nothing. I still see all the pictures of attendees and your slides. So it doesn't
Yep.
change that for me.
Right. Right. Oh, geez. Okay. So I'm also, I now realize, because I just expanded um, being able to see people, I now realize that I'll have to not touch my hair while I talk, or I'll have like
We all
I'll
do
have to like,
it.
right? But my hair at this particular length has like a real specific staying power, a sculptural quality, Lori. That's
You should watch
so.
a two and a half, maybe a 3-year-old on a story time. Funniest story time ever seen. This little girl went and she put her hair up. I'm not sure she heard anything in the story, but she was having a whale of a good time watching herself. I laughed like it was just too funny to me.
That's awesome.
Uh,
I'm going to mute myself for a second and go like get water and coffee and my notebook and stuff. Since everything seems to be working. Actually, I guess I should also make sure I can
so as
scroll
an
through our
organizer,
slides.
now when it's Eli's turn, you should be able to make him the presenter without
Oh,
me having to intercede. This might be really cool.
I
You,
can also dismiss him if I wanted.
what would be the advantage of me being a presenter?
You can probably, we could make him an organizer and then he'd be off. That, see, there went your
Oh,
slides. It's just us. So you stop sharing.
oh, that
You
was a
stop sharing your
mistake.
screen.
All right, so I will not be making Eli a presenter.
Oh, because he wants the same slides.
Right.
Right.
Okay. All right.
So, and now we know that's why we start early. All right, I'll be right back.
Okay.
Me too.
Okay. I have mine. I couldn't get it early. Um,
You're very well prepared. Margot, close the closet door. Oh, how come her volume was like blinking?
These last few minutes are the most awful because it always feels to me like I'm giving a party and nobody's coming. Oh, and it looks like the
Yeah.
recording has worked well. I need to stop
Okay.
the recording and start it again.
Mm-hmm. While we take a second before we get started, I just want to tell all of you how happy I am to see you. It's just lovely. Yeah, I just, all the feels, guys, all the feels. Those of you who know me know that in real life, I wouldn't actually hug you, but something wonderful about virtual meetings is that I could pretend that if we were in real life, I would give you a really good hug. But I feel it. I do feel the feeling that I would like to pull you close, and it's nice to see you all. Hi. All right. While people arrive, and just to get us thinking in the direction of today's session, I'll just give some introductions. Welcome, everyone. My name is Margot Gastina. I'm a librarian, and I'm the administrator and principal investigator on the project Rural Libraries and Social Wellbeing. This is the first of 4 sessions that we'll do on project findings and practical outcomes. The series is called Working Toward Wellbeing. If you don't want to attend next Friday, no bigs. If you don't want to attend for the next 2 Fridays, but you want to come 3 Fridays from now, also no bigs. We're not getting married. You can do this however you want. I'm joined today by another librarian and researcher on this project, which is pretty big and national. And though she's not presenting today, I'm also going to note that Hope Decker is with us today. She was our other primary researcher with this project. Eli, would you like to introduce yourself a little?
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you, see some familiar faces, which is nice. I'm Eli Ganay, the New Mexico State Librarian, and I am a researcher on this project, and happy to be here and help Margot present.
Oh, thanks. Before we hop into some definitions, today we'll be spending a lot of time discussing what it means to talk about social well-being, which has a sort of fuzzy definitional quality. And we'll talk about what it means to practice in rural communities, which also has this funny definitional quality, right? So before we get into those, I wanted to spend a moment with acknowledgement and gratitude. I'm already just feeling super warm and thankful that I get to see people that I haven't been able to see in a real long time. But I also want to share with you that rural libraries and social well-being is like a love letter to public librarians, for sure. It's also like this love letter to place, where each of us is on the map geographically, where we exist within built environments, within ecological systems, and within time. I currently live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it means that I live on stolen land that's been stolen actually repeatedly time and again. I can't give the kind of land acknowledgement that you've heard in other talks, because the land is not acknowledged to be stewarded or have a specific history. That for us, where I live, land is still very contested, and who it belongs to, well, is a colonial construct and not something I can just deliver to you in a sentence. So I live in a time when I am learning not only about what it means to occupy stolen land, but also what it means to live within this colonial present, right? And I'm grateful that I get to live this life where it's all complicated and messy, and I can learn with it and I can love it. And I'm also thankful to this project because it gave me the opportunity to be in places which have made the past present in a really impressive and currently impactful way. And it helped me pay attention to how the past and our histories and our place impact storytelling and community narrative, and that these local stories create power. They create power for some, they keep power in hands that maybe don't deserve it anymore, they transfer power, and they can keep people outside of community. So when we're talking about social well-being, when we're talking about rural communities or any place, we're talking about specific places and their own histories, which can't be generalized out. We can learn things from one another, and we can have sort of themes and findings, but you'll hear repeatedly throughout this work that what you do, how you practice some of these principles that we've heard, and some of these trends or themes that we've heard, is going to be local to your place, to your library, and your people, and your land. We'd like to thank the Institute of Museum and Library Services and the Southern Tier Library System for paying for all this stuff and supporting us in the work. And we want to thank community members and library workers who dedicated hours of their lives to this project in interviews and sharing their insights, because they're just as curious as we are, and they're eager to understand how community works and what role libraries play in that mashup. Generally, I want to thank public library workers, volunteers, and trustees. Hey guys, we spent 3 years finding out what we already knew, which is that your work matters. We now have some extra tools, but it's always mattered and it continues to. So our specific questions were about how your work mattered in terms of social well-being. So let's get into what exactly I'm talking about when I talk about social well-being. Social well-being is a multi-dimensional community measure of individual capability. Sounds like word salad, all has meaning, promise. So like your library, social well-being happens at this intersection of the individual and the community. So like for some people, they like thinking about micro and macro and meso. The library would exist at the meso level. Some people like thinking about individual and community and what happens in between those two things. We know, we can imagine when we think about our own experiences, that there's this intermediate space that happens between our own human selves and our insides and what happens out there. When we talk about social well-being, we're talking about a lot of different dimensions that impact how you interact with the community and what your abilities are when you interact with them. So what we notice is that social well-being often connotes for people, or the connotation that they have is things like physical health, mental well-being. Sometimes people have a sense that it would also be about like social connection, whether or not we feel isolated or lonely, whether or not we feel a part of a group. When we talk about social well-being within our project, we're talking about things like education and the capability of you yourself to achieve the educational attainment you're seeking, that you want, and that you have those opportunities and access to opportunities where you live. What we mean when we say access to opportunities means not only do you have like the physical access, like you can go into the library and there's a cool computer there and there's like Wi-Fi and you can, I don't know, get an online course that you're interested in, but also that your social constructs where you live support you in achieving those capabilities if you so desire them. So that means, so a lot of people have been talking about things like paid family leave in New York, right? So a person might say, well, anybody can take care of a loved one. Of course you have the ability to take care of a loved one. Paid family leave in New York allowed that you could actually care for a loved one. You would have the capability of doing that without giving up your job. That's a different level of capability, right? So when we're talking about social well-being, we're talking about these nuanced levels of capability. Not only can I go to school, but when I go to school, I'm experiencing education that supports me in my own goals. And this is what I mean by that intersection between the individual and the community. Other dimensions of social well-being can include place, whether or not you can go outside and breathe free because there's enough oxygen, but also because there's not a wildfire, or also because there's not a plastics factory that's making it difficult for you to breathe healthy and making it difficult for you to live a life free of asthma. It can also mean physical security, and that means freedom from physical insecurity. So freedom from violence or strife in a way that keeps you from exercising power over your own lives. It also includes political voice. Political voice is a little tricky. It sounds like we're just talking about whether or not you can get to a polling location. It also means, especially in rural communities, many of which aren't incorporated, so they may not have a local formal government. It means that you're still able, your voice and your opinion and your notion of what community life should be is still able to be acted on. You can offer that contribution to the community where you live, and it's heard and acted on. You have some power over the way the future of your town and your own life works. So social well-being is a really big term, and it's got a lot of stuff packed into it. If you want to read more on those definitions, of course, we have published works and we have a website or whatever. But when I'm talking about it, the thing that I wanted you guys to get when we leave this slide is that it is many layered, and it is, sometimes people say that it's a description of the good life. The challenge with this term, the good life, is that it might indicate to you that there's one definitional good life, and it's drinking Mai Tais on the beach. It's not, it's your good life. And if there's anything that we heard community to community, it's that even in locations of severe isolation, so a community deep in the mountains or a community far that, a farming community where most of the amenities have left, even though they once had robust amenities. Even under those conditions, people feel as though they are living in their ideal community and that they are living their good life because it's their own and they have conditions there that support them and their own capabilities. So you can see that this is this complicated and messy and super beautiful thing. I hope that's how you see it. That's how I see it. As we discuss this, I'm going to say that overall, the whole project, these themes that we're going to talk about, these tools, all of this stuff is going from this image that I made on the left to, or my left? I think it's still your left, to this image that Hope's daughter made on the right. The left is what we think of when we think of communities, in that it's an individual fingerprint and it's not replicable. It isn't, what happens in Pulteney is not what happens in Wellsville. Some of the things are the same, and some of our needs and our needs for capability are the same. So we're going to reduce what we talk about to these things that are the same, but how you practice them has to go back the other way. It has to get back to the complicated and true conditions of your local community. So our vision, or our work, has like a few principles that we found. And this is going to shape the way we talk about setting your own compass toward community well-being or social well-being for the individuals that live in your town. And so anything worth building in your community through your library will be built in small repeated steps over time, using your heart, in full view of your soul, and in partnership with the people and the environment which surround you. Probably in another 20 minutes, you may experience some fatigue around this, around my focus on with and local and messy, but it's what we found. So here we are. I make no apologies. When we describe what's happening in a community, we've been referring to this as pathways. And pathways to us seem to be the best analogy or metaphor or truth about how we do the work. When we say small repeated steps over time, you can imagine what trailblazing or a new path looks like when it cuts from the library to the elementary school. Instead of going on the sidewalk, it's just this dirt trail that nobody really designed necessarily, though maybe they should have. When we talk about it, we also noticed across communities that there is no checkbox. There's no list of things I can do, including we worked with dozens of librarians over the last year, library staff and workers in rural libraries, to create a set of 20 tools for your use. And there are some still in the works, so eventually there'll be more, a couple dozen. But just because we have this toolkit, we are not telling you that if you just go do the tools, suddenly your library will be this thing. It doesn't. You can do all of the tools over the next couple days. It won't transform your community. It may help you. We think they are useful. We think they are useful because they help you think about your community and your library and service in this way. But they don't do the work for you. Sorry. There's nothing that's going to speed it up. There are small things that you can do that can really help, and they'll do them immediately. And we'll get to some of those later. But the big work takes time. Katura is on the call. She's been at STLS now for 4 years, 5. And before that, she worked at a member library for another set of years. And before that, she worked in another town for another set of years. And I think anybody who engages in this work will know, and probably all of you do too, that you'll have an idea and you just have to accept that maybe it's an idea that happens in 10 years, or maybe it's an idea for a successor, or maybe it's an idea that you could just quickly turn around. But all of those things are part of what build particular pathways of well-being. So when we talk about a pathway, that's what I'm referring to. Some set of repeat movements you make toward a goal. The pathways that we noticed that were positively impactful in libraries and communities were those of belonging, self-determination, and mutualism or mutual aid. Things that allowed people to feel that they should live where they lived, that they would get support from others if something went wrong, and that they have power over their own lives. So you can hear how this interacts with the social well-being definition I gave to you like, I don't know, probably 5 minutes ago now. All right. Our work also encourages you to use your heart. I know in libraries, we don't often like to talk about love and care and heart, but man, it's just a construct that you would leave your heart at home. And you don't have to. You can have generative boundaries between your work and your life that keep you safe, that still allow you to love your work, and that still allow you to love every single person in your town. I mean, other than the jerks, but also to love them in a way. You can approach your work with love, and people will know if you do. Also, using your heart may help you mitigate some of the biases that keep you from seeing community members in their full contributing capability and potential. It does happen sometimes that we have a set of notions in our mind, a set of beliefs that keep us from seeing a particular community member as a contributor to our town and as a valuable gift to our community and to our library. It keeps us from seeing that. If maybe we could shed some of that, we've got some tools to help maybe, but if maybe you can shed some of that and operate with your heart here, you may get to see value in people who may have been invisible to you in the past. So that's what using your heart means in this context. In full view of your soul, I'm going to do all the forbidden words in this workshop. I'm going to talk about love. We're going to talk about souls. Just go all in. To be clear, I'm not a Christian, so like when I talk about soul, I don't have the same definition as maybe some of you, period. And what happens with your soul and how it operates is your own business. What I'm talking about is, it's a little Walt Whitman-y, actually. I simply mean that nothing should offend you at your core that is your work. And if it does, then it's happening wrong. And you need to exercise your power to change it. Here's the other reason for that. I just talked about how capabilities operate through these pathways of belonging and self-determination and mutualism. You can't be barred from those pathways as a worker in a library. If you are, your work is not doing what it needs to do. Those pathways need to be open to you as well. And that will nourish you. To me, my language is that it nourishes my soul. Your language may be different about that. And finally, pathways have to be constructed. You can't make one by yourself. You just can't. Like, well, you can, but it takes like so much longer. Many of you probably live in a place where there's a path in your yard or in your town that was made maybe by one family or one person. But it takes a lot longer to do it by yourself, right? And if you take a break from it, it will get overgrown and it won't exist anymore. And then it was all for naught. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that has staying power and that is community-wide, and therefore must be done in partnership with the people and the environment who exist in your context. With is an important word here. Susan Green, one of our case study librarians from Vermont, talked about why she's able to do so many things in her town without feeling a sense of burnout. Like sometimes she feels a little overwhelmed because things like shutting down and opening back up or transition moments. But she's able to experience those things, and she's able to experience transformation and change in her community over the decade and a half that she's been a library director, because she does things in partnership with people and with the environment in which they're all existing. And so it means that she gives power over. If somebody's like, I've got a great idea, Susan, I want to show documentaries about frogs every Wednesday after spaghetti dinner. She says, okay, see what happens next. Go do it. She doesn't say, oh, okay, great idea, I'll go do all that work. If we're going to do it with people, it means that we do it with their ideas and also with their labor. One of the key features of pathways of belonging that we found was that people only felt that they belonged to a town or in a town when they contributed to that town or that community. Sometimes, like 3/4 of the time in our communities of study, that locus of contribution that helped people feel belonging in their town was through the library. Think about that. Like, that is amazing. Feeling belonging has been found by many social scientists, including Eric Kleinenberg and ethnographers like Philip Holtman, that social isolation is deadly to us, and that belonging is nourishing and extends our life expectancy. It's not like a small thing to figure out how to invite contribution and belonging from your community. It's not, it isn't this tiny extra work. It is your work. And it's one of the most impactful things you can do in your town. Oh, before we get into tools, this is a getting started tool that we have. But before we hop into these, I want to ask, because we just went through sort of a lot of definitions and how they operate. Before we go any further, I'd like to ask if you guys have any questions. So I'm going to go back.
There's a comment from Sophie that I think is really poignant in the chat box. I don't know if you can see it, Margot, since you're sharing your screen, but it says, it's so nice to hear this. I've been getting pushback from others who think that this kind of work is overreaching for a library. And that's a really, really important comment and really a focus of the work that we're doing. Because, you know, I think one of the key takeaways from our research is that the way communities talk about how they value libraries, how librarians are valuable to them, is very different than the way we talk about it ourselves. It's very different than the way we measure success. It's very different than the way we celebrate success in our fields. And we think, if I can speak for all of us, that we think that success should be recentered around social well-being impacts that have to do with belonging and mutualism and self-determination, not necessarily what we use now, which is more like program numbers, checkout numbers, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yes to all that. Yeah, Sophie, you asked the pivot point mission creep question, right? Like that's how I view questions like this. There's this moment for certain library people where any discussion of social well-being, or its many dimensions outside of culture and school, like educational effectiveness, a lot of people will view this work as mission creep and view like discussion of community and community well-being as mission creep. I think the tide is turning for a good deal of librarians who want to know a little juicier what it is that they do that matter in their town. We found that social well-being and the notion of pathways really helped illuminate for us what it is that helps us work in this way and allows us to really understand the how of our work when it comes to this stuff. What we also notice is that mission creep is a myth. Or rather, to use an economics term, it's a misspecification, or a statistics term. It's a misspecification. Mission creep assumes that there is a certain document-based, media-based, information-based, we use the three words sort of interchangeably, but it's the same sort of theory of work, right? That like whatever it is that we do, the mechanism by which we do it, and also its impacts, are about the information that we share. What we posit in this work and what we heard and saw in rural communities is that it isn't, the information is a vehicle. The library is a vehicle But when we talk about information and documents, we miss out on talking about how just having the building makes this huge difference, right? Having access to a facility is this huge difference. Nancy, your library just sort of right before COVID, so sorry about that, but your library went from a room to a building, like a legit building of its own in the last handful of years. Would you mind unmuting and telling me or sharing a little bit about what that meant in terms of community service?
I think on several levels it was kind of almost like chest pounding. Like, look what we have here in this dinky little town. We went from one room, and I helped Barb, as did 1,000 other people, move stuff out of the library, the then library. And we marveled then, and we still do, about how she managed to, first of all, have all that stuff, and then actually do programs with it. But what we went from that I don't know, 800 square feet or something, to 6,000 square feet with light and chairs and comfortable places to be and settings for people to come and hang out. And then of course COVID came, so the people who were hanging out were those of us saying, okay, what can we do? What can we do? But now things are opening up again. And so that's all by way of saying it was just like a huge, like, you know, a great, I love you kind of rush that happened in the community. Not just for those of us who have, you know, kind of been slogging along through this whole thing. And Barb, our director, who's been there for, I've forgotten how many years now. But she has an office with windows now. And so just these small little things are huge. They're not small at all. So is that kind of what you were asking about, Margot?
Yeah, sure. Yes,
Oh.
exactly what I wanted. Thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So we miss out on that love, and we miss out on how people need a space when we reduce the work of libraries to transaction, or we reduce the mission to document or information exchange. And you'll notice that we also do a ton of shoehorning. I offered to you that in 1946, right after World War II, the ALA produced a statement, a plan for the nation's public libraries, something like that. The citation is 1946, Martin, so if anybody wants to find it and know what the actual quote is, you can. But in it, the author talks about how the plan for the nation's libraries is to obviate and build on the potential of each individual American. Yeah, it's a national plan, so there's some language there. But what I want you to notice is that we had this idea, it's not mission creep. For 80 years, we've been thinking that our work as public libraries in communities is community work that supports each individual's capability and potential. What we notice when we're talking about rural communities, and we think maybe some of these lessons also apply in neighborhood libraries, like branch libraries in urban or suburban systems, is that belonging and self-determination and mutualism is the outcome of that work done in right relationship to the community. And so to get toward how we think about this and how you might do some reflection and self-assessment to help you frame this thinking, we're going to talk about tools that were made for this project by rural librarians and by some of us. Eli, take it away.
All right, thank you. So we made out of this project, along with the directors that we worked with, several tools to help you all, to help us think through some of these concepts. And they're very reflection heavy, but also kind of help give you the time and space to think through some of these concepts, but then, lead you towards action as well. I think it's important to say, just going back to Sophie's comments, that I think we can all agree and make the case that we should be measuring success based on the impact on our community members' lives, the positive impact on our community members' lives. And further, that we should not be defining that it should be their definition. So when it comes to the concept of mission creep, we need to get into the habit of talking about libraries that defines the success and what libraries do that is focused on the community members. And as Margot said, that the way that we do that is by operating where community members interact with the larger community. So a lot of these tools are kind of around that. I want to say about this first tool, this is a sort of meta tool. It's a tool to help you decide which tools you want to work with. And the reason we created this getting started tool is because there's a ton of stuff in this project. This project just created a huge bunch of data and research findings and tools. There's a lot there. You don't have to do it all. This is like an anti-certification process. I work in state government, so we get these like, these emails that say by the end of the month, you need to take this course and then send me your certificate, and that's very much like, here's a course, watch a video, take a quiz, check the box, here's your certification, you're done. This is the opposite of that. Starting with the research, there are briefs, there are case studies, there are the academic papers we wrote. There's a lot of data. There's all of our interview quotes that we've coded, which is an amazing thing. And that's a real rabbit hole you can get sucked down, is just going through the actual quotes. So we interviewed over 200 people and then transcribed and then coded all the quotes. And those are all freely available on the website. You can actually read through those and see if you agree with the way we coded them even. And then there's all of these, these concepts that Margot has brought up. Things like belonging and contribution and social connection, what it means for someone to be seen and feel known. We were talking about measuring, circulation. Is an ebook circulation the same as a physical book circulation? We've all gotten into the habit of saying, yes, an ebook checkout is the same thing as a physical book checkout. But we have to remember that with an ebook checkout, the person getting the book checked out to them does not get that sense of being seen and feeling known. There's not the chance to say, oh, if you like this book, you may also like this other book. All those little things that we do in libraries, it turns out matters a lot. And so we can't fall into the trap of just saying a circulation is a circulation. Self-determination, shared identity, et cetera, et cetera. We've got a lot of concepts here. There are, for each of us, some things that we're naturally really passionate about and that we do really well. And there's some things that we need to be intentional about working on. And so a lot of what this tool is just to help you think and get yourself in the mindset of being intentional about where you want to put your effort, where you want to make improvements. It's important to say in that context that that should be based on your unique community. So what Hope does at her library is going to be very different than what you do at your library, because Hope comes with her own strengths and interests. And she's going into a community that is very unique and that, might be really good in one area, but really need improvements in another area. A lot of the tools that I worked with, and you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Margot. A lot of the tools that I helped to develop are about contribution and belonging. So one of the key dynamics that we found in our research is the dynamic between contribution and belonging. The thing that makes people feel like they belong in a place or at least one of the very key things, is that they have a chance to contribute to the wider good. And that makes them feel valuable. It makes them, all that stuff about feeling seen and feeling known, that makes someone feel safe and secure, that makes them feel like if they broke their leg, their neighbors would help bring in the harvest. All of that stuff starts at having a chance to contribute and feeling like you are valued by your neighbors. Libraries play a huge role in that. There aren't, especially in rural communities, a lot of long-term institutions that are there helping to bring people into the community. The most obvious place we see this is with newcomers. It's true for all marginalized people, all people who are isolated, but you can see it most readily with newcomers. When you've got a newcomer to your community, how they develop a sense of belonging is really important. And a lot of libraries naturally do this. You've got like welcome kits or whatnot. The libraries where the newcomer often like stops by to get their library card. It's like the first thing they do. But the things you do, like saying, oh, you might be interested in joining this book discussion group, or, oh, you have a young child, you might want to come to this program. All of those things that help kind of bring people into the community are really, really important. So a new family coming to a story time, yeah, the story is great, the literacy aspect is great, but the real value is that they have a chance to meet other families, and then they make plans to do something on the weekend. That's the sort of thing that you need something like a library to help do and to build those pathways. The Awakening to Community Potential tool is really looking at how we see our community members and whether we see every community member as having value and ability to contribute. Every single one of us sees some people as being more able to contribute or have more value to contribute than other people. We do it all the time. We have huge blind spots. An example I like to use that really makes sense to me is when we've got opening on our boards, who do we look for? We look for the well-off architect, the lawyer. We think, what practical skill do we want to bring onto our board? We aren't thinking, well, who uses our library most? Young families. Let's bring in the single mother to be on the board, because we see value in a very specific way. So this Awakening to Community Potential tool is really about being intentional about thinking through who we see in our community as being able to contribute, and thinking through the people that we don't normally ask to contribute. How can we do that? And it's not, it's, of course, having people contribute to the community is about improving the community, of course. The more people that are able to make the community a better place, the better place the community will be. But it's so important for that individual to, having the chance to show a piece of art in your art gallery, or get connected to a community group that beautifies the gardens. That stuff just has these social impacts that are really about, the social infrastructure stuff, the social connection stuff. Libraries are, oh, go ahead, Margot.
I just wanted to mention another minor finding that we heard across communities about contribution was we heard from volunteers in some of our interviews. And when we did something that I think sometimes runs counter to our practice in public libraries is that those volunteers got to choose how, when, and what they did, which is really giving control over to community residents. And I can hear and understand all of the parts of your brain that just ground to a halt at the notion that a volunteer can just walk in and be like, what I want to do is clean the library, and I'm not going to tell you when I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it the way I want. But it is like a key feature of contribution is that they own it. They own what they're contributing, and that they have control over it. They can do it with you, and you can have insights and talk to them about it. But that was like a really important feature, that people have independent and individual control over what they do.
So in libraries, we, for a long time, think about a library as maximizing community resources, maximizing the amount of book money we have to provide the most books, buying one computer that everyone can use rather than each person buying their own computer. Like, we know that libraries fill this role of maximizing potential. We only have so many resources in our community, we want to maximize it. Well, it turns out the same thing is true for mutual support. Libraries are not just libraries of books, they're libraries of mutual support. Another like mental conditioning thing I think we need to do with rural libraries is that when we think about innovation in the library world, we almost always talk about big library innovation. And it's important to keep in mind that a lot of big library innovation is just recreating what's already happening at rural libraries naturally. A good example might be like a big library that's that creates like a human library, like check out a person to fix your plumbing or whatever. In rural libraries, that's because you're so connected. Rural librarians are so connected to a high percentage of the population. That sort of thing just happens naturally. You don't need to have a specific program around it. Can you go to the next slide, Margot? I'm going to try to finish up quickly here so that we have some time for discussion. I created a tool for community engagement from the perspective of all the stuff that we're talking about. If some of you have used like the Harwood tools, like the Ask exercise or the Aspirations exercise, those are all community engagement tools that are focused on aspirations of community members, which is great. But what would a community engagement tool look like if it's about social well-being? If what you're trying to find out is what you're trying to get is a deeper understanding of how your community operates and how people think about their community so that you know which levers to pull, so to speak. So this, instead of asking the Ask exercise questions like, what are your aspirations? It asks things like, do you feel like the other people in this town know what your skills and talents are? It asks things like, do you feel like you have a say in how decisions that impact the whole community are made? Those are the types of questions that you don't get from asking someone their aspirations, but that as librarians who are trying to impact positively on social well-being, we really need to start developing better understandings of, right? So how decisions are made in the community is a huge thing. All communities have inputs in various ways that go through some sort of decision-making process and then get spit out as outputs. And we don't, in my opinion, spend enough time thinking about those processes. One thing I'm really interested in is how success is measured. So let's just take like a town board. You got the mayor, the council members, whatever. They take in tax money. They decide how to spend the tax money. Do we use the money to fix the pool so that we can open up the pool this year? Or do we use the money to fix the potholes, whatever? They get to decide, how that money is spent. And they get to decide how success is measured. Those processes are really important to what a community feels like. We interviewed people in towns where every community member pretty much felt like they had a say in how decisions were made, how resources were used, and how success was measured. And we interviewed people in towns with the opposite, where people felt like the town council was making dumb decisions. They didn't care about the community members. They were just interested in their own interests. The way people talked about their town in those two places, well, more than two places, is very different. The way it feels to live in that town is very different. The way they describe well-being is very different. Just something as simple as having input into community decision making. One question is, what do you find delightful or joyful about living here? Another one is, what about this community makes you feel safe and secure? What makes you feel not so safe? Just to give you an example. Hope, I don't want to put you on the spot, Hope, but if you're able to, Hope's actually worked with some libraries who have used this tool. This tool was not intended to be a survey, but because of COVID, it got turned into a survey by multiple libraries. But Hope, if you're able to, do you want to describe how this particular tool was used?
During COVID, people adapted the tool to their community and the things they were trying to find out, and did a Google form and asked people to fill it out. One of the people that I worked with in Oklahoma did Zoom meetings with these questions, and she targeted different groups, like the Chamber of Commerce and a group of nonprofits. So there are, like, ideally, what people would like to do is go out into the community. One person plans to go to the Calico restaurant in town, and we gave her a small grant, and she's going to buy pie and coffee for the people that she interviews. Another person wants to set up a table at the Little League game. Everyone in town goes to the Little League game. The Fillmore Library is adapting the questions for children and partnering with the school and going into the school, and they're going to interview the kids.
I remember one of the librarians saying that they learned by talking to the community, and I think they adapted this tool in some way. I can't remember who it was or what they did exactly, but it clued them into the fact that a lot of students were having mental health issues in the community and feeling high anxiety, and they were developing library programs around social emotional health stuff when they hadn't been thinking about it until they asked those questions. So I'm going to stop there, and Margot, do you want to take over and open it up to discussion?
Sure. Thanks, Eli. As Eli indicated when looking at the Getting Started tool, the project's really big. We're going to spend time on smaller components in the coming few weeks, and specifically on practices that embody some of those different components. One of them, though, is on data, so that's less embodying. Do you guys have any questions for us? Feel free to unmute since I can't likely see you. I'll just be quiet for a second. See you later, Linda. It was nice to see you. Hearing them, some of you may be typing in the chat, and so Eli, I'll lean on you to notice if there is a question that pops up in the chat. But since you haven't spoken any right now, here's the link to our website, and I'll give you a few more takeaways. One is Hope was talking about a project that we've been doing called the Tools in Action. Has worked with 20 libraries and is currently working with another 10, mentoring them through the use of the tools. in a sort of structured, programmatic way, in a 5-week structure. So we're getting to hear specifically how people use the tools and what small shifts in practice they're doing to make them to improve social well-being outcomes, but also to make the library director feel better at work. Like, it's not just one thing or another. It's not, I know that Rebecca has left, but there's some mix here between feeling better in your work and also doing this other kind of service. Eli, what was that question?
The question is, how do you suggest moving forward with the toolkit if I'm in a mid-level management position, assistant branch manager, and do not have the authority to change practice in the library system?
Oh, what a wonderful question. I love questions of power and what we can do in our work. I was reflecting on this actually this morning, Danielle. I have been that person. And I was thinking about actions that I used to take when working at the reference desk on Sundays. I was a Sunday fill-in. And there were 3 things I now consider bad, not bad, but like practices that don't speak to me and my soul, that don't align with my values or truths. One was we required photo ID for someone to get a key to the bathroom. Another was the first person to greet patrons entering the library was a security guard. And the third was that we didn't allow sleeping. And the consequence for sleeping was that if they didn't immediately sit up when yelled at, sit up, we tossed them out or we got a security guard involved. I've been thinking about that. I didn't have any power to change that suite of policies that clearly have a target toward a particular population. You can probably imagine what these policies did as a suite of actions and how people felt when they came into the library. So I wish that as a person, and if I have the opportunity to do these kinds of things as a person without decision-making power necessarily in my institution, will be to use the power I have in my shift. When you're at a library where you are doing shift work or where you're in a library with many people, a sweet thing about doing this research is that the people that we interviewed often had all the power, right? Because they're in a building with only 1 or 2 people, they have all the control, they're the ones setting policy. Their behavior as a director is what sets the tone for the entire space and also the policies and practices. For we people who have worked as shift or middle management or just like a person on staff, we have other opportunities. So something that in this particular case that if I would travel back in time, something I would do is leave bathroom keys out on the reference desk. So a person could come up, grab it and use the bathroom. When waking up a sleeping person in the library, I would wake them because the purpose of the policy was to make sure nobody died in the library, right? Like that somebody didn't die and we didn't know it. I just go over and make sure they're still alive and let them keep sleeping. I think this is probably how I would practice that. I may also encourage them to know what other opportunities for sleeping and getting rest exist for them. But there's stuff we can do that allows our personal practice to come into alignment with what we want. It can also be, as Eli indicated, simply allowing every person and helping every person who enters the library to feel seen and known and cared for. Something that we used to say in youth librarianship a lot was the teen that you welcome. When you say hello to the teen who enters your library, it might be the first time someone's spoken to them all day, right? That exists for everyone in your community. When you welcome someone into your space and allow them to feel seen and known and welcomed, then you might be the first person that day, that week, that month that has given them that gift of recognition and acknowledgement. And it's a hugely dignifying and humanizing thing to do. So I'd start there, and then we
I
can
was
chip
going to
away at the other
say,
stuff.
yeah. I was going to say that uh, when we talk about things like social connection and belonging, and then I put in the chat something about, feeling seen and known that Margot talked about. These aren't like top level policy stuff necessarily. This is like how you interact with people. This is recognizing that someone has an interest and connecting them with a community group that they might be interested in attending. And it's really interesting that what we found is that people want to feel known. When we ask, one of the first questions we ask is describe your ideal community, and almost everyone described the community that they were actually living in there, which was pretty interesting and a pretty significant finding. But when they described their ideal community, they always talked about like how they loved going to the post office and knowing everyone there and everyone knowing them. They like walking down the street and being like, "Hey, Bob, how's it going?" And Bob being like, "Oh, hey, Jerry." Like, people in small towns love that. That doesn't mean they don't also like privacy. So we have to, think about those things in two different ways. People in small towns oftentimes really value their privacy. So, those are, two different things that we have to keep in mind. So, so when, as an assistant branch manager, you are working with your staff or you're working directly with patrons, the way you interact with patrons, offer them book suggestions. Pretty significant to me from our findings was how important like books and book recommendations are. Like, that's not outdated at all. One of the main ways that libraries make people feel a sense of value and belonging is simply from the librarian saying, "Hey, I ordered this book for you because I think you will like this book." That has a tremendous impact on people, and that stuff doesn't happen at the. We worked with remote rural libraries, like really small towns. So the director is also like oftentimes the person doing circulation and whatnot. In a larger library, a lot of that social connection stuff happens lower down, not at the director level. Margot?
Oh, I was just saying we're now over time. Thank you all for sharing this hour with us. We're going to do it again next Friday. We'll talk about some of these practices in more detail and some other tools that are available to us. And there's an email on the screen. Use it. Well, this is like an ongoing dialogue about practice and how we do our work. So feel free to get in touch. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Hope.
Thank you, Lori, for having us.
Unmuted.
I'm going to turn off the recording.